Enough preamble. Let's get to this, Matt. I mean, we're going to talk about Cornel West and Bernie Sanders. We've talked a bit about West and what we think about this campaign, the things that we think are positive. I mean, I've said that voting for West will be one of the easier things that I've ever had to do in a presidential election. But we do have. I mean, I'll speak for myself. You can say what you think, Matt. But I have some doubts about how much steam, this train has. I think that one of the things that we have to learn from both the 2016 and the 2020 campaign is that we can do a lot with good campaigning, with the good messenger, and things like that. But what we saw, what the lack was, the reason that we didn't go over the finish line was that we don't have the base built. And we have to really be focusing on how to build the base. And it's a tough thing, right? Because building a base also means engaging in politics directly. But there are people who are always going to be selling folks fantasies that there's sort of one quick trick to socialism. And I don't think that that's correct. But there's also a force that we're going to focus on right now, which I find to be extremely negative to that entire process. What sort of forecloses and denies people the opportunity to sort of push or try different things, even if they're not successful. But before we go there, I don't know if there's anything you want to say at the top about West before we jump into this.
Not off the top, no. I mean, yeah, generally, like you said, like in New York, not a swing state. Very easy for me to say if he's on the ballot for the general, I'd vote for him, and it's because of Cornel West, and not because of the Green Party. I'd say that.
Yeah.
And but generally speaking, if it was like a swing state or whatever, like I vote for whoever the coalitions, particularly like Labor and different types of things, would want you to vote for in that situation. And I don't vote for who shares my ideas the most if it really actually might matter. But as far as like who does, it's Cornel West. Yeah. I appreciate like some things. Marianne's still mentioning Medicare for all, which I appreciate. So again, I can only be appealed to through ideas so much and podcast appearances so much. I need to see some interesting endorsements that are not podcasters. But I appreciate them using and I think it's gross that Vivek can get on CNN anytime he wants to call climate change a hoax. But Marianne and Cornell can't unless it's to discipline them for something, right? Like I think that's like that bugs me. But yeah, that's basically where I am with that.
Well, we'll get more into that, I think, in the strategy and stuff later. And for people who might want something that's more in depth, Matt, myself, and Mr. Ben Burgess had a kind of mini debate because I think Matt and I have a little bit of a different perspective, but I think in the final analysis, fairly similar on it. But if people want that maybe more focused on that question, they can check out that video. But I want to talk about this contemporary stuff right now because. We'll play this clip here, and then we'll get to the source material in a second. But this is David Pakman, who is a very influential and has a big reach, progressive YouTuber, talking about some news that just happened recently.
Progressive Senator Bernie Sanders went to New Hampshire over the weekend to rally in support of the re-election of President Joe Biden. And in this interview, he said, listen, Cornel West, who's running as a Green Party candidate, Cornel's a friend of mine. We need to bring the entire progressive community together to make sure that neither Donald Trump nor Ron DeSantis or whoever are elected president. Bernie gets it. And some progressives are furious with him. I've been saying this for weeks. The Cornel West candidacy is not serious.
Where there is a real question whether democracy is going to remain in the United States of America. Donald Trump is not somebody who believes in democracy, whether women are going to be able to continue to control their own bodies. I think we have got to bring the entire progressive community to defeat Trump or whoever the Republican nominee.
All right. So this is a short clip. We'll have some more Pakman so he can explain further his opinion in just a second. Well, let's go to the source material. This is a longer clip. This is what people are reacting to. Bernie Sanders went to New Hampshire, and while no one really thought Bernie was going to run, there was that kind of question. It's like, oh man, what if Bernie does a surprise announcement, which I would have loved. But as we said multiple times, it seems like that tank is out of gas when it comes to running for office. But anyways, here's Bernie and Cornel West. Let's hear what Bernie had to say.
Sanders, Cornel West, who is a close ally of yours, he is running a third-party campaign for president. He recently criticized you for endorsing President Biden's reelection. Listen to what he said.
I love the brother, and you know, even in love, people have deep disagreements about these things. But I think, again, he's fearful of the neo-fascism of Trump. People look at Biden, they don't really want to tell the full truth. He's created the best economy that we can get. Is this the best that we can get? You're going to tell that lie to the people just for Biden to win?
What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that certainly is not the best economy that we can create. That was what my speech was about yesterday. We've got to join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to all. We've got to cut the cost of prescription drugs in half. We've got to raise the minimum wage to at least $17 an hour. We've got to build the affordable housing we desperately need. But where I disagree with my good friend, Cornel West, is I think in these really very difficult times where there is a real question whether democracy is going to remain in the United States of America. You know, Donald Trump is not somebody who believes in democracy, whether women are going to be able to continue to control their own bodies, whether we have social justice in America, we end bigotry. Around that, I think we have got to bring the entire progressive community to defeat Trump or whoever the Republican nominee will be, support Biden, but at the same time, which is what I did yesterday, is demand that the Democratic Party, not just Biden, have the guts to take on corporate greed and the massive levels of income and wealth inequality that we see today.
All right, so there's a few threads here to get into, and we have some more Cornel West to play in a second about the Democratic Party. But I mean, let's just break this down. Let's get one thing right up top. I think that anyone who is out here saying that Bernie Sanders is a sellout or that Bernie Sanders is a sheepdog of trying to push people into the Democratic Party doesn't have their facts straight. There is no doubt about it that the left, as it exists today, is not only stronger in terms of like numerical numbers and people who are activated, but is way more radical and rooted and serious than it has ever been. And there's a certain section of people who do want us to return to a much smaller, and they might say more radical sense. But frankly, in my opinion, a lot of the politics that dominated the left in the 90s and in the 2000s and the pre-Bernie era were quite cynical. And we're not very focused on building up politics. I'm not saying anyone who's a leftist before that, I was a part of that, but what was the general tenor of the left? It was sort of giving up on the idea of doing mass politics. It was giving up on the idea of building movements that can win. It was giving critique where it was necessary. From all different kinds of perspectives too. One thing that Bernie really did was hone what you would call maybe the American leftist movement, right? People who are sort of further to the left of like the Democratic Party, hone them and push them into a more socialist and materialist direction, right? And like if you have to think of these things as like a gradient, there's like the general Bernie Sanders audience, right? Which is a full spectrum. People who are still to this day liberals who like some of the things that he said. People who are progressives who are with Bernie and they really like, for example, the fact that Bernie ran in the Democratic primary instead of trying to build a new kind of movement. And then there are people like myself who were socialists who wanted Bernie to continue to push the politics further. And we're hoping that he might be able to build some kind of mass organization. Where all of those people line up today is a little bit of a crapshoot because post Bernie, that entire coalition has just scattered to the wind. So like, let's just be very clear. Bernie, and also like, let's also be really clear about what Bernie is doing. I don't think, in my opinion, that it is good for Bernie Sanders to be rubbing elbows as closely as he is with Biden. I think that is damaging to the kind of movement and the kind of points that we're trying to make. Because yeah, Trump is bad. The Republican Party is bad, but Biden is overseeing an economy that is continuing to be more and more unequal. But sorry. Biden is playing a role right now that has been incredibly damaging, not just to the left, but to the country. Look at something like the IRA, right? This world's historic, right, as they try to spin it, this incredible investment in renewable technology. Well, what it is, it's a giveaway to the wealthy, it's a giveaway to the powerful, and it's a commitment to capitalists in the United States of America that, yeah, we're going to try to do something about climate change, but we're going to make sure that we don't touch your power. I'm sorry, friends, climate change comes out of the power of the capitalist class, right? Well, what does that do? That demoralizes and demobilizes. And in fact, for the people who are sort of in the middle on these kind of issues, it sort of says like, oh, look, we did climate policy, right? We've done some climate policy. That's extremely damaging. Not to mention, for example, what's going on with like student loans, and as more and more people are going to have to struggle under that, which in my opinion, an incredibly cynical move from the Biden administration. The way that they tried to forgive loans was done so in a way that it was always going to be attacked by the Supreme Court, so that Biden could say, hey, we tried our best. You got to give us another round. You got to vote for us again, and then maybe we'll be able to do something on that, right? That's what Bidenism is. Frankly, that's what the Democratic Party is. And I think it's really important for us to be clear about these kind of things and to be sober-minded about it. Now, when it comes to Bernie, and we haven't gotten to Cornel West, and I want to throw to you, Matt, but like when it comes to Bernie, it's been very clear from the very get-go that when Bernie Sanders decided after he lost the Democratic primary in 2016, right, and an election that way more so than in 2020 has been proven time and time again that the Democratic Party put their thumb on the scale and tried to deny Bernie Sanders the opportunity to become the candidate of the Democratic Party. I just don't think that that is in doubt if you're being reasonable or well-versed in the facts of that situation, right? People were pushing for Bernie Sanders to run as an independent, as he had done time and time again in Vermont against both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. He refused. And Bernie Sanders made a decision that he thought that he could participate within the Democratic Party coalition to try to push that party in a certain direction. And I think, even though I might disagree with some aspects of that decision, some of the ways that he's done it, I think that you would also be lying if you wouldn't say that Bernie Sanders has been able to influence things in a certain direction within that party. Again, not my strategy, not my tactic, but there is no doubt Bernie Sanders made a decision. He's been able to get some things for it. We can disagree with it, but the idea that, oh, he's doing it for money, he's doing it for power, he's doing it for all this kind of stuff, I think is wrong. Bernie Sanders
doing it for winter coats.
He's doing it for more $1,000 winter coats. Bernie Sanders has made a tactical decision that I disagree with, but I think that it is absolutely wrong to say, oh, he's doing it for cynical or nefarious reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, so like a few things, like my preferred, and I think the problem is like Bernie, he's content with just being the best senator now and not a leader of any sort of insurgent democracy. What I would have preferred is him to have held his, endorsement for a long time and make himself something of a kingmaker. I mean, Trump did this in 2012, was it? And Mitt Romney had to come to kiss his ring. You should, and the thing is like, I don't see, but the problem is like, I think Bernie's just content to play an inside game now. And like, I would have preferred he was harsher against Hillary in 2016 and harsher against Biden in 2020. He was never that. And the other thing is like, you know, the interesting thing is Harry Reid had to talk to him out of primary in Obama in 2011. He really wanted to, and he should have. We could have got the Bernie moment earlier. It could have given more coherence to the post-Occupy stuff. And that's the thing that really bugs me is like, I don't get, I understand where it comes from like, but just from a rational argument, I don't think these things are bad for the Democratic Party in turning out voters. Like, I think their concern is absolutely misplaced. I don't think RFK running as a fucking Democrat is going to be bad for Biden because one, he's fucking not appealing to Democrats in any kind of way that's going to embarrass Biden. And two, if the people are going to vote for him, they're going to have to register as Democrats to do so. So like I don't think in 2016, I think a lot of the Democrat establishment blames Bernie. I think he's probably tired of hearing about like how he cost them 2016, even though that's insane thing that I don't think anybody listening to this thinks. There's, I think a lot of people who maybe, you know, write checks to Democrats. I think that Bernie participating in any sort of democratic process at all in 2016 is the sole reason Hillary was exposed as basically not being acceptable enough to voters to beat Donald Trump. But I mean, I got news for you. It was whoever was, if actually Bernie wanted Elizabeth Warren to run against Hillary Clinton, and because she wouldn't, he did. If Warren ran, I honestly think people would have looked even worse at Hillary than Bernie. Maybe I don't know. Like I think actually whoever, if it was just Martin O'Malley, like Hillary had so many liabilities, and it's the denial of that leads to this sort of like, oh, we can't trust anybody. In order to save democracy, we have to not do any sort of democracy. And I think it's misplaced, but I also think it's just like, even if it wasn't, what are you protecting us from? Like what are we actually protecting in the name of democracy here?
Well, I mean, this is what gets down to it, and I think we're going to reiterate this point multiple times. But let me just introduce it for the first time here, because in a second we're going to go to Cornel West and some of the things that he said. I will say this, in my opinion, I think one of the biggest criticisms that I have of Bernie Sanders, even more so than like these kind of endorsements and these things, is that after 2016 and certainly after 2020, he didn't try to direct his movement into any kind of serious organization. He created something like Our Revolution, right, which is just unfortunately not a serious organization to try to mobilize and organize a real powerful working class movement in politics. Just not. What he should have done would have been to direct people to join the Democratic Socialists of America, become a member himself, and participate in that. But it became very clear that Bernie didn't see that as his role. It didn't seem like that he was interested in it, right? And that is my fundamental, most basic criticism of Bernie, is that what he needed to do was to do that kind of groundwork, because there is just no doubt about it in my mind. Let's make 2 points really clear. Bernie Sanders lost in 2016 and he lost in 2020. And he lost because there was incredible amounts of corruption and there was incredible amounts of attempts to prevent it from being a fair and free election. No doubt about that. But that's politics. There's always going to be forces that are going to try to stop you from getting elected office out there, right? Be they the Democratic Party, be they Capital. And if you are somebody who considers yourself a socialist, you can't tell yourself bedtime stories of a free and fair election. It is always going to be a fight, and it will be a fight not just at the ballot box, not just on election day. It will be a fight once you win those positions, because to put any of the things that Bernie Sanders wanted to put into place, he was going to have to fight against a Democratic Party that is fundamentally reactionary, fundamentally interested in protecting the power of the wealthy and privileged, fundamentally as their electoral political strategy, uninterested in solving any of the issues that they campaign on, because they work much, much better as kind of carrots to hold up 4 years later. Student loans, I think, is one of the most perfect examples of this. They run on it. They have the ability to do something on it. They don't do it. They create a circumstance where it can be thrown into question again so that they can run on it again, right? Same thing with Roe v. Wade. Same thing with a lot of these other social issues that they hold and argue that are critical to their party. They want to see those things unresolved because it is good for them. The movement that we are trying to build, the movement that Bernie Sanders was really important in starting to launch, always needed to expand from just something that was maybe an electoral coalition every once in a while into a moving, breathing, active mobilization, growing mobilization of the working class. I say this all the time and I'll say it again. Bernie Sanders' campaign, not me, us, was not just an idea that, hey, Bernie Sanders thinking about all of us because he loves us so much. He was saying, hey, if I have to fight with the Supreme Court, the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party, and then not to mention the capitalist class, the insurance industries, and all the people who profit off of privatized medical system like we have in this country, I'm not just going to need your vote. I'm going to need to have an organized and rooted working class movement to back me up. Yep. It didn't exist in 2016. It didn't exist in 2020. It doesn't exist today, right? Yeah. So what is the lesson that you take from the past few years of Bernie Sanders? It is that we have to be building up a very strong, independent, mobilized working class base in politics. That's hard. That is one of the most difficult things that you can do. And it is, but it is also the only job, the only thing that is going to get us out of the crisis that we are in. So anyone who's trying to sell you stuff of like, oh, well, if we had a more pugnacious, right, which is a fancy word for someone who's a fighter, right? A guy in there, Bernie Sanders was more critical of the Democratic Party, or if he did this kind of one quick trick, he would have won South Carolina. They're wrong. Because what Bernie Sanders needed to do was to cultivate that movement. And he cultivated it only so far. And then stopped doing that work, and then there was no kind of intermediary force to capture a lot of that energy, and that's why you're trying to see this. I bring all that up to say that, like, for me, because this is the question that all other questions sort of dance around. What is the strategy for the left in this kind of post-Bernie moment? And it has to be, how can we build a strong movement that is capable of seizing opportunities that might come from, Bernie Sanders might not be running for president again, but let's say another thing happens in the future, we have the opportunity. Can we build a movement that would be capable of riding that opportunity? Because those things are going to happen again, into power, right? And that is the question that people seem the least interested in doing. Instead, it's like, okay, how can we just do reruns of this again?
Right.
So all of that, is just sort of laying out like the kind of work that is in front of us. And let's get to Cornel West here for a second and what he said about the Democratic Party. This was on Rising the other day, sort of responding to what Bernie Sanders had said. And let's just play this and hear what he has to say.
Oh, no, I think that Brother Bernie's being consistent. He said that all along, and I can understand the argument. I think it's a plausible argument. I just don't think it's a persuasive one. I think that the argument he's making means that there's never any possibility for breaking from the corporate duopoly. There's never any possibility of trying to speak to the needs of poor and working people. I'm fresh from Mississippi, as you all probably know, there in Rankin County with Brother Jenkins and Brother Parker. I was there, the precious mother of Jenkins, Mary, and those lawyers down there, Brother Malik and Brother Trent. They're dealing with issues that the Democratic Party won't touch, which is issues of poverty and intense police brutality. And we haven't even got to the military adventurism abroad. So I think in many ways, Brother Bernie's making a plausible argument, but I think deep down in his heart, he knows that the Democratic Party has no fundamental intention of speaking to the needs of poor people and working people. They are dominated by their corporate wing. They're dominated by the militarists when it comes to foreign policy, and that he and AOC and the others are going to be, in a certain sense, window dressing at worst, and at best, people to appeal to every 4 years. But the Democratic Party is beyond redemption at this point when it comes to seriously speaking to the needs of poor and working people.
Yeah, and I think that Cornel West is 100% correct there. About what the Democratic Party is. The idea that you're going to be able to shift this party has just been proven wrong time and time again throughout the entirety of American history, from the populist movement, the socialist movement, to recent examples. For example, in Nevada. In Nevada, people did the thing that kind of folks, Twitter critics make all the time. Well, why don't you guys get involved in the Democratic Party and try to shift it? Well, they got Bernie people and DSA people in control of the state Democratic Party apparatus in Nevada. What happened? Harry Reid and the folks around him get together and they say, hey, we're not going to play this game. And, the people around Harry Reid created this new kind of organization that operated effectively as a shadow state level Nevada Democratic Party, and weakened and destroyed the Nevada Democratic Party so that those people had no influence or ability to play politics, right? No, the Democratic Party, it's not just like, oh, you touch it and your heart turns to stone and you become a cynical reactionary. Certainly some people get into high places and they turn their backs on the movement. Structurally, this is a party that is controlled by capital. They have very little interest in doing the kind of politics that are necessary to build a working class movement. There is just no doubt about it at this time in my head that we have to be very serious about building independent bases of power. Now, what that structure looks like is an open conversation, right? Some people think that what we should do is we should create our own organization that operates like a party. And then because of the structures of the American electoral system, run people within the Democratic Party who are disloyal to that party and operate in that way. Some people think that we should create a new party, register it, do all the work of getting signatures on the ballot to be able to run and overcome all those kind of hurdles, right? But through the political independence, we can really make our message ring true. I think those are important tactical debates. While I do think, in my opinion, if I could snap my fingers, what world do I want to live in? I want to live in the world where we just have an independent socialist party. I want to absolutely be done with the Democratic Party. But I do think that there is an importance of recognizing how to cultivate power and cultivate a base. And that is a very serious consideration that people should take. And it is much more important, in my opinion, than how we feel about certain names or imagery being associated with certain kind of candidates. At the same time, we have seen with the congressional electeds and the Democratic Socialists of America, what happens when you don't have a strong structure, when you have people sort of doing their own kind of thing, where you basically have politicians that are above the movement. And we see this every couple months with members of the squad. We had Bronco on the program, I think, to make it clear to people that the kind of doom and gloom narrative that is also popular with some people on the left is not accurate. But there's just no doubt about it that, yeah, we should be doing much more than we're doing. I bring all this up to talk about this general question of Cornel West, what Bernie Sanders is being critical of, which is him running as a Green. I will say, I don't think that I see that this campaign has the legs to win the presidency. I just don't think that's a realistic expectation here. So then the question is, what are you doing? Is it a messaging campaign? We've said multiple times on the show, I don't know if messaging is what we need at this point. We need organization, right? So like on a basic level, on a personal level, Cornel West is somebody who I'm like going to vote for and support in the presidential election. It's just like, it's an easy decision for me. One of the easiest things I'll ever do in politics. We don't spend a lot of time on that campaign on this program because I think that we should be focused on that base building thing that is really necessary in politics, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a rejection. It's not a criticism, a condemnation of Cornel West. It's just saying, hey, I don't think this is going to do what we need it to do. I don't think that it's right to sit here and tell people something if you don't think that this is going to happen. But I will say one of the interventions that I do think is important is pushing back against, going back to the original start of the segment, the people like David Pakman, who want to attack the idea of doing any kind of independent movement of the Democratic Party on the left, because that is extremely dangerous. One quick historical example, it is always going to be the most consequential election of your time. That's how politics works. We're talking about one of the highest offices in the empire, right?
Politics is important, yeah.
Do you know who else you could have said this thing to? Eugene Debs, somebody who is like now universally praised by a lot of leftists, but a lot of leftists who would say that you should never run independent of the Democratic Party. It's also somehow like Eugene Debs. Well, you could have said the same thing about Warren G. Harding, right? Oh, don't mess this up because Warren G. Harding is a great threat to working class people, right? For people who might not know 1920s politics, I mean, Harding was a character, a monster, a vampire of the capitalist class, of the brutality, who want to do horrendous things to this country. It did, right? You could have said that against Eugene Debs, right? And eventually, if you do build this kind of movement, there are going to be times, this is coming in our lifetime, hopefully not just in our lifetime, in the next 5-10 years, where we might be needing to support an independent socialist party against the Democratic Party that is also running against the Republican Party, right? And I don't think that we can just get there today. I don't think that we have the base. We have built that today. I don't think it exists right now. But Lord and help me, we are going to have to do that and get comfortable with what that means. It means taking on the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, something that people who call themselves socialists, or even people who might call themselves reformers, progressives, know at their heart that the Republican and the Democratic Party are two arms of capital. They're different in different ways, but they represent the interest of that class. We are going to have to be comfortable with confronting both of those things at once. And anybody who spends a lot of time foreclosing that opportunity, saying to people, hey, this is dangerous, this is hurtful, all those kind of things, is arguing maybe potentially against themselves in the future. Now, if they're just always going to make this argument, then that's it. So they're saying that we aren't going to do this, right? That's their position that they've taken. But eventually, even if it's not for president, for a Senate election, for a congressional election, hell, for a mayoral election, right? Running in a city, eventually we are going to have to be putting up candidates that are fighting against both of these institutions. So this is why I get really frustrated with people who, instead of dealing with somebody like Biden, there's no reason that it should be potentially close between a Biden and a Trump, right?
And Trump, yeah, no.
And all of and the fact is, it's not just because, put those candidates up on a spreadsheet and compare their policies. Everything is going in Joe Biden's favor for this next election, and they are doing everything possible to make it difficult for themselves. So any kind of thing. So if Cornel West gets 4% in the vote in 2024, and people say, that swung the election, right? As dubious as I thought that it was, for example, in 2016 with Jill Stein. That will be on Biden and the Biden campaign to own, because they had every opportunity to not put forward a kind of right-wing version of climate policy, to not fail on the student loan debate, to do more for people on healthcare, hell, to endorse one of the most popular policies in the United States right now, Medicare for all. They had every opportunity to do that, and they chose structurally, because of their position as a capitalist class, to not do that. That is their responsibility. And if we are going to say we are always going to be in a position of weakness because we won't confront that, right, we are condemning ourselves to be, at best, a junior partner of a coalition that doesn't care about us, or at worst, to just pure marginalization.
Yeah, there's a dynamic that I've kind of noticed in a pattern. Reading Revolutionary Spring on the 1848 Revolutions by Christopher Clark, and he's talking about the Chartist movement in the UK being remembered as less sort of revolutionary than it was, because the press there had sort of said these are the British sort of working classes revolting in this sort of good way, unlike those Continentals. And so they sort of talked themselves into accepting it in a better way. A similar thing happened, contrast between the Great Awakening, religious revival in the 18 or 1740s, versus the Salem witch trials a generation earlier. And the difference is there's a lot of different types of energy coming from people below. This is broad brushstrokes, but the authorities in the Great Awakening determined to accept it and welcome it as a refreshing sort of light into the institution, as opposed to saying this is demonic, we must crush it under rocks. And I think there's something to that here. And if the Democratic Party can't be accepting of any sort of questioning of the fucking old guy that everyone sees as old, can we maybe see some other options before we just sign up for another 4 years of that? Then democracy hasn't been saved, it's been lost. And that's the truth. I think we deep down all know is that we don't really have a democracy. I think because it is dire, and we need to have a strong showing against a GOP that's bad, for whoever's opposing them. They should have a much deeper bench than this shit. They should have and I mean, the other thing I would say on the optimistic note is I do think that we're in a more fruitful political ferment and sort of ideological environment with regards to the different the labor momentum and stuff like that than we were. I mean, certainly Obama 2011. And so hopefully that what we need to emerge can emerge from that. But that's why I think how are you going to vote in a year and 2 months or 3 months? That's going to be the question that dominates it. But who gives a shit?
Well, I will just say this, and I will say, I'm incredibly optimistic. I think that people are getting much more serious. I think that some of the, while there's been tensions within, for example, organizations like the DSA, I think it's coming out of those stronger and more serious and more rooted than it was, at the heyday of the post-Bernie moment, when you saw this mass influx of membership. No doubt about it. I mean, the more reactionaries, these are friends and comrades, the more conciliatory forces within the DSA have been defeated, very much so. They still exist, but not as strong as they once were. And that was that, and frankly, and we don't need to go in the history. People don't know the history of the DSA. I mean, 2000s and 90s, not really a radical organization, right? But also a very small one. And that's sort of the point, is that its history, like sometimes talking too much about the history of that organization, I think sort of misses the moment. But I will just say this. So and I agree. So very optimistic. Labor movement's going much stronger than ever was. And that's where these things need to come from. More and more young people and people across all ages. I really hate in general, by the way, the generational war stuff. I think it's so unhelpful for thinking about politics. It's not a material analysis. But more and more people are becoming interested in questions like socialism, and what people are looking for is something to do. So anyways, I'm very optimistic. I bring all that up to say something that I'm now going to say is pessimistic. All of the kind of glory of the midterm elections for the Democratic Party shows a new a new movement, a new vitality for the party, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Not even talking about what they can do or have done in certain states. Do you know what that has come from? A class de-alignment of the Democratic Party, right? A class de-alignment of the Democratic Party, where the working class is no longer one of the strongest forces in the Democratic Party, right? We can argue if ever they were the most influential, but they were somebody you had to cater to. The Democratic Party is, being honestly very blunt about the fact that they view themselves as a party of the upwardly mobile middle class, of the professionals, and of wealthier people in urban areas.
Well, and sorry, David, but this is why they lost in 2016, actually, because you can find Chuck Schumer ahead of time saying for every person that Trump picks up, we're going to pick up 2 in the suburbs.
So all of this, maybe the Democratic Party is going this, and look, some of that is a different constitution of the Democratic Party. That might even mean changes in the Democratic Party. That might even mean support and even deliverance of some progressive policy. Because if you look at that class, they do have, particularly on social issues, right, fairly progressive views, and even on some economic issues, like they like. Maybe more distributionist policies for the poor than maybe the reactionary right-wing middle class that makes up the Republican Party, right? So yeah, you can see that and recognize that, and also still be a Marxist, for God's sakes, and see that the power base in the Democratic Party, not just the people behind the scenes, but now more and more their voting base, is this kind of upwardly mobile middle class, progressive on some things, but liberal, fundamentally upper middle class, right? And that is who is driving the Democratic Party. And what that means is, they will support some things that we might like, right? Student loan forgiveness is something that's fairly popular with that base of people. But they will always turn their back when the class conflict starts. And if you start telling yourself bedtime stories, the Democratic Party is changing this way, right? You might even be right that the Democratic Party is reorienting from the 90s and the 2000s, but it's reorienting again around the interests of a particular class, right? That again might have some kind of policy similarities in the short term with some people on the socialist left. But they have no interest in pursuing our kind of goals. And as we talked about in depth when we did the 18th Brumaire, be very careful about class collaboration with people who have very fundamentally different class interests than the working class. Yep. So there's more that we might want to say here, but just so it's not like a pure lecture, let's do some buzzy YouTube stuff, because Pac-Man's position on this, I think, represents this kind of character very well. We played his kind of short clip here, and he's going to bring up the elephant in the room, the thing that's always gets brought up, which is the threat of the far right in this clip. Let's just play a couple seconds of it, and we can respond.
Biden. Why would Bernie sell out? What does he have to gain? He's 80-something and towards the end of his career. Why on earth would he sell out? Does Bernie have a track record over decades of being in public service of ever selling out?
Sorry,
and
just
now
1 second,
he's going to sell out.
The sellout sort of language is
It's
grow
lowest
up a
common
little bit.
denominator, because what he's talking about. He's talking about the Jimmy Dores. He's talking about all these people who've made like a media arm for themselves about the
Right.
sellout kind of thing.
So
Those
we're going
people
brainless
are,
because of Jimmy Dore. Like
yeah,
the thing is like I think Bernie should be selling his endorsement for something. I think that's why I'm kind of annoyed at it. Is like, what are you've been playing a good soldier for a long ass time now. Like, I need more. Like like it's not like, and so like this, like whether you can sell the sellout, like, I mean,
yeah. Well, it's the
yeah.
easiest one to. It's the easiest person to debate with, right? Because again, like those people, like and like I will say, like there's a full spectrum of folks out there. I will say that, like there are a lot of people like. I have nothing but contempt for the kind of media figures who just want to like farm outrage without any kind of real development. Even when they say, "Oh, we're putting it in a certain kind of direction," it's come on. Like again, like the Cornel West campaign, like I support him in the general sense that like I will vote for him in the presidential election in 2024 in Texas, right? I have seen that it's very clear, and I say this with all respect with Cornel West, and I think we should have him on the show. I'm sure he would do it. I'd love to talk to him about it. I haven't seen from this campaign that it shows any kind of avenue of being able to deliver on the things. And look, I don't think that Cornel West even thinks that that's the goal here. I think the goal here is to be out in public and sparring with those kind of people. And again, I will vote for him because in the most general sense, like I think that's fine and good, right? But no, it's not going to be able to get us out of the problem that we're in. It means real serious organizing, means real long time commitment to these kind of fights and things like that. So there's Cornel West, who I don't really have an issue with, and I don't have an issue with him running. And then there are people who are trying to sell the story to people because it keeps the lights on for the next couple of years, because you can do outrage about how Bernie Sanders has betrayed the movement and all this kind of stuff. Those people I don't find to be very serious. The people who are like making money off of this, building media careers off of that's not of interest to me. And I think that it's very lazy to engage with those people, because those people don't make arguments that are very sophisticated for these kind of things. So it's very easy to poke holes in them, right? Now, for like everyday people who might be really into the West campaign, I have nothing to say to them other than come and like join the movement. Let's build a base and a mass movement that could elect somebody like a Cornel West. That's the work that we need to be doing. I think that the fact that you think that that we need to stop the war machine, that people deserve more, that Biden's not doing, that the Democratic Party is a party that's set up for the interests of the wealthy and the powerful, we are here for you, and I want to continue to build that movement and kind of solidarity and get to work on those kind of things. But the kind of media figures that he's trying to get at, yeah, I totally agree, Matt. It's lazy, it's easy. That's why they're doing it.
Allowed at this point? No. Bernie Sanders is committed to stopping dangerous autocrats. Progressives should be committed to stopping dangerous autocrats. That is the truth. And so, listen, is Cornel West wrong?
Wait, I can't let him get away with this without mentioning something that I think is really important for people who don't know anything about this. So there's a country called Bolivia, right, that actually has one of the most successful and inspiring socialist and workers' movements in the world right now. MAS, the Movement for Socialism, has been incredibly successful in uplifting everyday working class Bolivians in their fight for a better future, and in the fight against American imperialism and American capitalism, and in the fight of an entrenched, racist, reactionary, wealthy, and well-connected elite and powerful in that country. And you know what happened in that country a little while ago? If you're not familiar with it, there was an election where Evo Morales ran for president, an election that he won, that was stolen, that was stolen by the reactionary right, with the support of the United States empire, with the support of multinational corporations, because
in the precise way that Trump wanted to steal 2020. The
100%.
results coming in, we're going to lie about it in the precise way that Republicans would do it here.
Yes. So that was a moment that we have seen. And you know what happened there? People were beaten in the streets. People were killed. Incredible social gains were rolled back in an instant But because this is just a general point, because Moss was not a party that was just based on message, but was actually a party that was rooted in the working class. People fought for months upon months to be able to eradicate the reactionary right. And now Moss is back in power, and the perpetrators of this coup have faced legal consequences for their actions. And that's a great point, Matt, about how this is exactly what Trump would like to do in this country, which is deny an election.
Say,
But
oh,
what
there's
happened?
something's coming in with the numbers. They look funny. That's all they did. That's all they did to say that doesn't look quite right.
And you know what though,
and
like you can talk about, oh, you know, the fog of war, right? Calling things in real time from
Yeah.
the get-go. From the get-go, people in Bolivia certainly, but also in American media,
Yep.
not to pat ourselves on the back, but people like us at the Michael Brooks Show, we're saying, hey, this is lies. This is wrong. Evo Morales won the election. So when there was this far-right movement to deny an election, put an autocrat in power, to deny the will of the people, and to pursue all of these attacks on indigenous folk, on marginalized people, and on the poor, do you know what David Pakman was saying?
The revolutionary left is getting Bolivia wrong.
Yeah.
And I just like to look at the ratio on this. 1 retweet, 23 quote tweets, 8 likes. I'm one of the 2 bookmarks. Pretty shocking. Shocking stuff there. Yeah, I mean, really, yeah, you're right to stop it at autocrats.
Because I'm sorry, I'm not going to take fucking lectures on somebody like that on how to fight the far right. Right? It's just not going to play this kind of game. But anyways, we can let
because it is serious. It actually is serious, as he's trying to say, and it's so serious that he should probably address that. Maybe I'm wrong, and he has. I don't think he has. I've seen people say he hasn't, and so like maybe I'll do some digging. But like, if you care so much about attacks on democracies that empower autocrats, let's put our money where our mouth is.
All right, now let's hear what we have to say about Cornel West.
On all of his policy ideas? No, of course not. Is he completely wrong for most political offices? Yeah, to some degree. Does he have...
So also, like, let's also, interesting little addition here too. That is not just like sort of maybe what other people might say is like, oh, I don't think this is, going to win, or has Cornel West, somebody who has been an outspoken critic of empire, an outspoken critic of inequality, an outspoken critic of all these kind of things, is somebody who's not capable of political office, right? And look, you can maybe say like, hey, there's somebody who has not been a politician or whatever before, but you can't say it in defense of somebody like Joe Biden, somebody who is regularly outfoxed by Joe fucking Manchin. Talk about somebody qualified for office. Nonsensical.
I mean, that's elitist. That's technocrat. Like that's not my politics. That sort of like I'm actually more grossed out than this than I thought I was. That's the framing he puts in. Like, is he the type? Cornel West is absolutely the type of person we should want in fucking public power. Like, I'm sorry, you think he's the first one with fucking debts? Are you shitting me?
Well, we're gonna get to that in a second. Frank.
Yeah, I know.
Have any shot of accomplishing anything other than getting Trump or DeSantis or whoever elected? Best case, his campaign does well. He gets what could be called well for a Green Party candidate. He gets Trump or DeSantis elected. And so this isn't about silencing dissenting voices within the left. This is not about saying people shouldn't run or should be blocked from running or anything. No.
It's about telling them to silence themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, like, and he does. There's a longer clip, so we came in at the end and at the beginning, right? But he talks about so it's not just Trump, it's DeSantis, it's the rest of the Republican Party, and this just, I'm sorry, I know some people get mad when I say this, but I think it's true. This means this is here forever. Because the Republican Party was dangerous when it was Ronald Reagan. The Republican Party was dangerous when it was Bush. The Republican Party was dangerous when it was Romney or McCain or any of these folks, right? The Republicans are always going to be a threat. They are a force that needs to be defeated. And you know how you don't defeat them? by playing this kind of kick the can down the road game that the Democratic Party is doing, and making a party that is effectively another appendage of the ruling class. The reason that it's such a sickening game that we have in this country is that you have two parties that are dominated by the ruling class. There is no opportunity for a real working class alternative. And if the Pac-Man strategy got its way, right, there would never be one that could challenge it. Right. I mean, this is why this argument infuriates me, right? Because maybe it was novel in 2016, maybe it was novel again in 2020. The fact is, it will be 2024, it'll be 2028, it'll be 2032. Those conditions will not change as long as the Democratic Party continues to operate in the way that it does. And it's very clear the Democratic Party has no intention, and structurally that party is so hostile to any kind of change that it won't be changed. So this is a permanent state of affairs in politics that forecloses a candidate who is rooted in the working class, somebody like Cornel West, from winning in any kind of circumstance, right? I mean, yeah, anyways.
It's anal I mean, not to be Freudian, but that's anal retentiveness, just pathological on a broad scale.
I'll leave that with you.
It's about, do we recognize the insanely dangerous, autocratic, fascistic almost authoritarian direction that the Republican Party has gone in over the last 6 years? I recognize it. Bernie recognizes it. Bernie, who was the progressive darling just a few years ago. Remember when the test was, are you progressive enough to support Bernie? And I was.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh,
by the way, great win. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. I will be a purity tester. If you can't support Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020, then you have no business speaking to the left. I mean, like, look, again, like, I am somebody who like, even with all the stuff we're talking about Bernie and the frustrations that we have, right? Strategic and things like that. Tremendous love for Bernie. I mean, I was saying to Matt,
absolutely,
dude, if we get like the revolution or something like that, I hope Bernie is around for it. I think he would be happy, and we would give him state honors. And if he's not around, there will be statues of Bernie Sanders in an American workers' democracy, right? Somebody who I have tremendous respect for. That is the easiest thing in the world to do. To say that is like, oh, I'm in the in crowd because I supported Bernie Sanders. That is not, that impressive. And I'm sorry, as somebody who was very happy with the right wing taking power in Bolivia, it's not surprising. And I guess kudos to him. He did go out on a ledge, but this is sort of why it's not that interesting to listen to him now. Yeah, we already respond to most of this stuff. I just have to finish playing it because there's some just very important additions at the very end.
Okay. Now it's, oh, this guy is just trying to silence voices and Bernie's too conservative and all. No. Bernie gets it. And so I'm glad that he is saying it this directly. Is he alienating some purity test progressives? Yeah, he is. But is he making a point that needs to be made because it's true? And the danger, as he's saying it, the danger to women, the danger to all of these different groups we claim to care about. If Biden doesn't get elected, meaning Trump or DeSantis or Vivek or who knows who gets elected, it's an insane risk to be taking. And then, by the way, the owing back taxes when you say everyone should pay their fair share, the owing child support when you say that we must respect women and children. I mean, it's a no for me, dog. I'm out, to quote the Sharks.
Ooh,
right?
I didn't need to hear that.
Sorry, Matt, but you did. You have to see the whole thing.
It's a no for me, dog.
Pretty awful.